All the way to
Some
the
people
right.
don't know their math symbols. Which one's left hand?
All the way to
Is
the
that
right.
one right? That one great? That's all some faces. No, you got it. Well, I'm going to use this one, right, for left hand. True? Think of it like an arrow. Lower. Just think like lower, right? That symbol. This would have been if it said what? Greater than.
Greater than.
Would you put this in your notes? When do you put the not equals to? If they say is different, if they use that wording, or sometimes there's another phrase they like to use, if they say has changed. So when if they say is different, or if they say has changed, they haven't indicated if you're going greater than or less than. And we're going to put a not equal to. Okay? Now next class, when you and I are going to perform a hypothesis test, and when it's this, they call this a right-tailed test, and you and I will shade the right side, it'll be fun. When it's like this, you and I will perform bell curve, but we're going to shade the left side. You know what you do when it's a not equal to?
Center.
They call that a two-tailed test, and you have to shade both tails. Don't worry, I'll talk about that next class. Cool? So if you want to draw these now, you can, but that's coming up in 10.2. Right now, we're only in 10.1. So I'm going to read something from the book, and I'm going to have you set it up for me. Does that sound good? Yeah? All right. Let's see how good you are. Ready? Can I raise? Remember, what symbol's always here?
The main.
No matter what, equals here. This can be a mu, or it could be, what's the symbol for population proportion? That symbol. When do you know you got to use the row symbol? And when that's row? If they give you percentages. Okay? So you got to determine which symbol to use. This is always an equal sign. This can be one of three symbols, right? All right, let me try one. Can I raise? All right. Let's see how good you are. Everyone, you can lean that up because that's always there. This is always here. This is the null hypothesis. This will be the alternative hypothesis. By the way, I do want to point out, a lot of you might read literature on the internet. You know, you like to research statistics on your own. Some stat books use an A here for the word what? Alternative. If you prefer that, please feel free to do that. Some stat books put H sub A for alternative hypothesis. But your textbook uses this. I want to stay consistent. I'm going to put an H sub 1. All right. And when I am on page, let's see if you can crush this. You got to set up this hypothesis test. Hey, Autumn, I'm going to pick one of the three problems from this section. So you'll be able to do it again. But let's see if you can get this. I'm going to pick number 15. It's on page 483. All right. So it is on page 483. Number 15. And this is in section 10.1. All right? You go, what do you got to do? You just have to set up the hypothesis test. The author knows if we don't set this up right, the whole problem's going to be over. All right, the first sentence. It's titled Teenage Mothers. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 10.5% of registered births in the U.S. in 2007 were to teenage mothers. Okay? Now that's the first sentence. So guess what that is? The what? That's the status quo, right? That's where they're getting this number. It's like some number they got from Census Bureau, right? That's our government. They figured this out. So our status quo is you're getting 10.7%. I'm going to put it over here. Am I going to use this symbol? Or am I going to use that symbol?
Row.
I'm using row because it's a percentage. Everyone hear that? It's a proportion. So I'm going to write row, not you, equals, and what was it? 10.5%. Now, do you want to write it in this format, or do you want to write it as a decimal? I'll write it like that. By the way, what is that decimal, in case someone here wants to write it as a decimal? That's 0.101.
5.
In case you want to write it. Hey, almost done with this problem. This has to be the same parameter. That's the row. What's this?
Mu. The row.
Same symbol. It's got to be the same one. This number here, everyone, it's got to be the same number. So far, so good? But Autumn, this next one depends on the wording they use in this next sentence. So everyone listen to this. The next sentence. A sociologist believes that this percentage has increased since then. What am I writing?
So greater than.
You know, if that helps, think arrow. Increased. You know, the arrow helps with the symbol. There you go. And next class, we'll perform like a bell-shaped curve, and we'll shade on the, we'll do a right-tailed test. Hey, one last thing we gotta talk about. There are two types of major errors that occur in stats, okay? One of them is called a type 1 error, and one of them is called a type 2 error. So when you write your report, you might mention these, I'm serious. You might say, to decrease the likelihood of having a type 1 error or type 2 error. I want to explain what happens. A type 1 error is when the null hypothesis is true, and the researcher, sociologist, nurse, etc., mistakenly rejects the null hypothesis. I'll put it here. Let me repeat this because I know a lot of you are copying this. What's a type 1 error? It's when I put the H not, the H sub 0, the ho. It's when the ho is true, type 1 error, alright, when the ho is true, when the null hypothesis is true, but the researcher does a hypothesis test and mistakenly rejects the null hypothesis, the ho, yeah. So that's the type 1 error. It happens. By the way, you remember Gossett? Gossett kept making type 1 errors. He knew there was trouble. Gossett kept making type 1 errors. This is the opposite. This is when the H1 is true, which is the alternative hypothesis, and the researcher, I'm going to put a word, everyone, and then I'm going to change it, okay? The researcher retains, all right? Retains. The H1 is true, and the researcher, remember, he makes a mistake, so I'm going to write mistakenly. H1 is true, and the researcher mistakenly retains
Oh.
the ho. H sub 0, the H not. But everyone, I'm going to cross out this word retains, and I'm going to tell you how statisticians talk. You go, can I use that word? You can't use the word keeps. You can't use, retains is probably the closest verb you can use, but we just say, in place of this, to not reject, we just say does not reject, or fails to reject. And I'll explain why. A lot of you are sitting there going, why can't you just say retains? Like keeps it. This is like the courtroom, everyone, with law. Is anybody going into law? Everyone, you know this. At the end of the trial, do they go up and go, do you find the defendant innocent or guilty? Is that what they say? Thank you. You've seen enough TV and stuff. That's not what they say.
Guilty.
Do you find the defendant innocent or guilty? That's not what they say.
Guilty.
What do they say?
Not guilty.
Do you find them guilty or what?
Not guilty.
Not guilty. Do you follow me? There's a reason for that, because everyone's assumed to be what?
Innocent.
Not guilty, right? We always think this person's not guilty, we say if we have evidence against them. So in this case, it's just like the law. It's just like in the courtroom. We can either reject HO or we just say keep it. We don't know if it's true or not. We're just saying perhaps someone didn't have evidence to go against it, so we fail to reject it or do not reject it. So in this case, if on the test, if I said, hey, I need you to set up a hypothesis test, and then letter B I say, I need you to explain what a type 1 error is, what would you say? What would you tell me? To explain what a type 1 error means, what would it be?
Ho is true.
Yeah, the null hypothesis is true. And then what was the mistake the researcher made? The researcher mistakenly what? Rejected it. Now, you might say, hey, before you leave, I'm going to confuse us on a test. I'll tell you what I do. You may think this is stupid, I don't care. This is what I do. I think of the word hop for this one. So I think, oh, ho is what? T for true, and then I think the researcher made a mistake. So what happened? If the ho is true, he made a mistake, he or she made a mistake, what did they do? They just rejected the what? Rejected it. Does that make sense? So I just use that as a way to help remember it. I think of hot. This you can do hit. Right? Hey everyone. Great job today. Have a great one.